December 8th, 1991, a remote hunting lodge in the Belavezha forest. 3 men signed a document that erased a superpower from the map. No war, no invasion, not a single shot fired. What they signed wasn't a surrender, it was an autopsy report. It confirmed what had been true for years. The Soviet Union, the empire that had terrified the world for decades, was already dead. Still giving speeches, still saluting flags, still pretending to be alive. The patient had long ceased to function, yet its motion, its ceremony, its rituals continued as if life persisted. By the end of this story, you will see the same autopsy quietly being prepared for America in 2026, not because we are failing, not because we are weak, but because we are making the exact same fatal mistake. Confusing motion for progress, appearance for reality, activity for vitality. This is the story of how empires die from the inside out, and why the most dangerous moment isn't peace, when enemies attack, but when your own people stop believing the lie. To understand how that forest signing came to be, we must travel back to the late 1980s, to a Soviet Union that was a masterclass in cognitive dissonance. On the surface, it was a global superpower. Parades, nuclear arsenals, rockets piercing the sky, satellites circling the globe. Yet beneath that surface, the machinery of the state had begun to rot. Factories produced goods that no one wanted, warehouses overflowed with products that never reached shelves, bureaucracies celebrated targets achieved while the real needs of citizens went unmet. In 1990, the Soviet Union was simultaneously the world's largest producer of steel, oil, and wheat, and a place where citizens still queued for bread. This was not poverty. This was systemic failure. Money flowed, yet it purchased nothing of lasting value. Soldiers saluted, yet defended a country that no longer functioned. The entire empire had become a walking corpse. This is what economists describe as activity without productivity, motion without progress. The warning signs were unmistakable, yet the system refused to acknowledge them. Machines ran, offices produced reports, armies paraded, and yet the country failed at its fundamental purpose, sustaining its people, maintaining trust, and adapting to reality. That failure was invisible to many at the time because it was concealed beneath rituals, statistics, and the carefully constructed illusion of control. The divergence between perception and reality is what killed the Soviet Union, and it is exactly what we must watch for today. Look at America in 2024. On paper, the economy is thriving. GDP grows, stock markets soar, the nation leads in technology, innovation, and military capability. But 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Wealth inequality rivals the Gilded Age. Infrastructure earns D+ grades. Life expectancy is falling. We are not collapsing, yet we are experiencing the same dangerous divergence. The map no longer matches the territory. Activity is celebrated as achievement, appearance is taken for reality, and systems that should provide resilience instead amplify fragility. This divergence is the first crack, and it has a name: economic circulation. In a healthy system, money flows like blood, carrying value to every corner of society. In the Soviet Union, money circulated, yet carried less and less oxygen. Factories operated, farms harvested, yet essential needs were unmet. Grain rotted in warehouses, while citizens queued for bread. Reporting and appearance replaced outcomes. The same pattern is emerging in America through debt. We are the world's wealthiest nation, yet we borrow $7 billion every day just to function. Not to invest in transformative projects or infrastructure, but increasingly to service debt itself. By 2026, interest payments may exceed major public programs. Borrowing has become a substitute for growth, not a tool for it. Productivity, the real measure of vitality, is stagnating. GDP rises, markets celebrate, yet actual output per worker is slowing. From 1995 to 2005, productivity grew 3.1% annually. From 2010 to 2020, 1.4%. We throw more money at the system and get less return. The first vital sign of imperial decline is when debt stops being a tool and becomes a crutch. The second vital sign is neurological function, the system's ability to learn and adapt. In the late Soviet Union, this function had failed. Technological stagnation was not the core issue. The core issue was denial. Soviet engineers and planners fell behind global innovation and were either unaware of it or refused to accept it. In 1985, while the United States developed the 80386 microprocessor, powering the personal computing revolution, the Soviets were refining copies of decade-old chips. Their most sophisticated weapons ran on outdated silicon, and their leadership either did not know or would not believe it. Feedback loops had broken. Intelligence was filtered through ideology, ego, and institutional fear. Decisions were disconnected from reality, and billions were spent on military might that would have failed if tested. America today is not stagnating in the same way, but we are concentrating our nervous system. 90% of artificial intelligence talent is employed by 5 companies. Venture capital and semiconductor production are concentrated in a few regions or even single points of failure. We innovate brilliantly, but integration is weak. We send rovers to Mars, yet a winter storm in Texas causes widespread blackouts. Spectacular technology cannot substitute for systemic robustness. Concentration creates fragility, and the failure to integrate innovation into daily life will become critical by 2026. The third vital sign is social cohesion. In the Soviet Union, collapse did not occur simply because of economic inefficiency. It collapsed because truth failed. Chernobyl, 1986, demonstrates this vividly. Radiation leaked across Europe, yet for 7 days, authorities remained silent. Citizens, neighbors, even emergency responders were exposed without knowledge. Trust evaporated overnight. Compliance remained, but belief was gone. People went through the motions, calculating survival privately while performing public rituals. America is following the same trajectory. Trust in government has fallen from 77% in 1964 to around 20% today. Trust in media, corporations, universities, and even science has also declined. Our reality is fragmenting into parallel narratives. Events are interpreted differently depending on the information ecosystem you inhabit. Financial crises, public health emergencies, elections, they are no longer universally acknowledged. This fragmentation is the third crack. Without agreement on reality, problem solving becomes impossible. The fourth vital sign is perception of reality. The Soviet Union's final failure was epistemological. Leaders came to believe their own staged narratives. The 1980 Moscow Olympics offer a stark example. Streets were cleaned, undesirables removed, buildings painted, flowers planted. Foreign journalists saw a thriving capital, while behind facades, shortages persisted. The leadership had begun to conflate performance with reality. America is developing its own version of this delusion through the curation economy. Social media feeds, algorithmically tailored news, and debt-fueled economic indicators create an illusion of competence. Confidence often replaces competence. Feeling strong becomes more important than being strong. The fourth crack is when the map replaces the territory and reality no longer guides decisions. Collapse is inevitable if unchecked. Imperial decline unfolds over time, following a discernible timeline. In the Soviet Union, the countdown began with Chernobyl in 1986, eroding trust. It continued with technological intimidation, financial strain, periphery defections, currency collapse, and finally the Belavezha signing in 1991. America's timeline, if mirrored, began with the inflation miscalculations of 2022, regional bank stress in 2023, debt ceiling brinkmanship in 2024, BRICS breakthroughs bypassing the dollar in 2025, and culminates in 2026 with the quiet recognition of systemic vulnerabilities. The path ahead branches into two. One mirrors the Soviet route: denial, doubling down on outdated strategies, blaming external forces, aggressively curating reality, and eventually experiencing managed decline that erodes global standing and domestic stability. The other requires resilience, humility, and adaptation, honest diagnosis, productivity-focused reforms, rebuilding trust, strategic recalibration, and creating a sustainable superpower capable of navigating complexity. Right now, America is heavily tilted toward the first path. This is not yet a catastrophe, but the vital signs are flashing yellow, signaling caution and opportunity. History offers a final lesson through the human experience. Soviet citizens adapted to decay. Engineers and entrepreneurs created software companies from collapsed state enterprises. Traders exploited arbitrage opportunities. Logistics specialists built delivery networks from the ruins of central distribution. They saw the cracks early and acted. In America, similar opportunities are emerging. Companies that enhance supply chain resilience, platforms that rebuild trust, tools that genuinely increase productivity, and strategic diversification can capitalize on the cracks in the system. The pattern is clear. The patient is not dead yet. Vital signs are observable, the treatment is known. Success will favor those who recognize reality, adapt quickly, and build resilience. Empires die not from external attack, but from internal blindness. Leaders confuse motion with progress. Institutions reward appearance over truth, and citizens settle for comfort over reality. America in 2026 will be judged not by its technological prowess or military might, but by its capacity for self-awareness, willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, and courage to act before whispers of decay become irreversible collapse. The timeline of decline is not abstract. It is measurable, observable, and unavoidable if ignored. America's 2026 moment will not arrive with explosions or gunfire. It will arrive in whispers, in quiet shifts that accumulate into irreversible momentum. Debt levels, trust indices, productivity metrics, currency movements, they are the vital signs that signal the underlying condition of the system. Just as doctors read heart rates and blood pressure to anticipate collapse, we can read these signals to forecast the trajectory of a nation. The first metric is economic circulation. In the Soviet Union, money moved, but value did not. In America, debt moves, but wealth is not evenly distributed. Borrowing to pay interest on previous debt is not growth. it is postponement of reality. Each quantitative measure that looks healthy on the surface masks deeper fragility beneath. Productivity, the oxygen of an economy, is slowing even as headline GDP rises. The second vital sign is neurological function. Innovation without integration is illusion. In the Soviet Union, the nervous system was broken by hierarchy and ideology. In America, concentration and centralization create vulnerability. 5 tech giants control nearly all AI talent. Semiconductor production relies on a single island. We may be ahead in lab innovation, but systemic resilience is declining. A localized failure in AI deployment, energy distribution, or logistics could have catastrophic consequences. The third vital sign is social cohesion. Trust in government, institutions, and one another is the social immune system of a nation. In the Soviet Union, the immune system turned inward after Chernobyl. People complied outwardly but disbelieved inwardly. In America, trust has eroded steadily for decades, producing parallel realities and fragmented truths. When citizens cannot agree on reality, collective action and problem solving become impossible. The fourth vital sign is perception of reality itself. The Soviet leadership believed its own propaganda. America's reality is curated by algorithms, echo chambers, and economic vanity metrics. Confidence often masquerades as competence. Belief in permanence becomes more important than systemic resilience. Motion replaces progress. Appearance replaces substance. Each of these vital signs, economic circulation, neurological function, social cohesion, and reality perception, is flashing warning signals today. Overlay them with trends in debt, geopolitical competition, technological concentration, and trust fragmentation, and the pattern becomes unmistakable. Imperial decline follows a cadence. Denial breeds minor crises, which escalate into systemic failures, culminating in quiet but irreversible surrender. In the Soviet Union, this cadence began with Chernobyl, progressed through economic and political crises, and ended in the Belavezha forest. America's cadence begins with inflation miscalculations in 2022, banking stress in 2023, debt ceiling brinkmanship in 2024, currency bypasses in 2025, and culminates in a quiet recognition in 2026. The difference lies not in inevitability, but in agency. The United States can choose to follow the Soviet path of denial, doubling down on flawed strategies, blaming external forces, curating narratives, and experiencing managed decline. Or it can choose the resilience path, honest diagnosis, productivity-focused reform, trust reconstruction, strategic recalibration, and sustainable adaptation. Both paths require courage, but only the second preserves vitality. The human dimension transforms abstract patterns into lived experience. In the late Soviet Union, ordinary citizens felt the erosion of certainty daily. Irina, a Moscow engineer, recalled the shift. The jokes changed. They became bitter, resigned. Then adaptations, learning which stores receive shipments, developing networks for essentials, finding Western goods to trade. Finally, detachment. The news became irrelevant, work became survival. The system didn't collapse, it hollowed out. One strong wind, and it all fell apart. Imagine America in 2026 if current trends persist. Maria, a small business owner in Ohio, faces unpredictability in supply chains, fluctuating interest rates, and contradictory economic messages. On paper, the economy is strong. In practice, she hedges, diversifies, and focuses on survival. The erosion of certainty is subtle but devastating, undermining planning, confidence, and long-term strategy. Yet within the cracks lie asymmetric opportunities. The Soviet collapse created early winners, entrepreneurs who understood the emerging gaps and built bridges across them, engineers who founded software companies, traders exploiting arbitrage, logistics specialists creating networks from state failure. America in 2026 faces similar opportunities. Resilient infrastructure companies, trust-focused technologies, productivity-enhancing platforms, and strategic geographic diversification. Advantage accrues to adaptability, not defense of the old system. The Belavezha moment teaches that acknowledging reality is not defeat, it is survival. The 3 men in the forest did not kill the Soviet Union. It was already gone. They merely confirmed what had long been true. America's choice is identical. Act before collapse, or perform superpower until the performance becomes too costly to maintain. The early warning system is accessible. Treasury spreads, dollar diversification, trust indices, and productivity growth are the vitals to monitor. An inverted yield curve signals financial stress. BRICS nations bypassing the dollar reveal systemic vulnerability. Low trust polls indicate social fragility. Productivity stagnation signals economic oxygen deprivation. These metrics are flashing yellow now. By 2026, they could be red. The choice is yours and the nation's to intervene or ignore. The patient is not dead yet. Economic blood flows, innovation pulses, social bonds exist, and perception is malleable. But without timely intervention, these signs will deteriorate into irreversible systemic failure. For investors, diversification beyond financial assets is critical. Tangible skills, networks, and geographic optionality hedge against the structural cracks forming beneath apparent stability. For business leaders, resilience must replace mere efficiency. Redundancy, distributed supply chains, and flexible strategies outperform brittle optimization. For citizens, demand transparency and real metrics over comforting narratives. Reality, not performance, is the currency of survival. History demonstrates that empires die quietly, not in explosions, but in whispers. When factory managers stop reporting accurately, when soldiers cease to believe, when citizens lose trust, decay accelerates invisibly. America in 2026 stands at that threshold. With observation, diagnosis, and adaptation, the decline can be managed and reversed. Ignorance guarantees decay. Action preserves power. Opportunity exists in cracks. Productivity tools, resilient systems, trust rebuilding platforms, and strategic diversification will define who prospers. The four vital signs, economic circulation, neurological function, social cohesion, and reality perception, are clear. They indicate risk, but also potential. The patient is alive. The treatment is known. The question is whether America will administer it proactively or wait for circumstance to impose it. Leadership requires courage to see the truth, act on it, and realign strategy. Citizens require the discipline to demand that truth, participate in solutions, and invest in resilience. Investors and business leaders require foresight to identify cracks as opportunities. History does not repeat, but patterns rhyme. The Soviet Union offers both caution and guidance. Superpowers do not fall in wars alone. They fall when denial overtakes awareness, when confidence replaces competence, when performance is mistaken for reality. America is not powerless. Awareness is the first treatment. Adaptation is the next. The future belongs to those who understand the autopsy before the body is cold. The Belavezha forest was quiet. The paper sign did not trigger collapse. They confirmed it. America's forest lies ahead. The documents may take a different form, a financial report, a sovereign memo, a technological disruption, but the mechanism is identical. Recognition before catastrophe, action before collapse, and adaptation before the unmanageable is the difference between managed resilience and irreversible decline. Those who read the vital signs, invest in adaptability, rebuild trust, and integrate innovation will emerge stronger, wealthier, and more capable. Those who ignore the signs, insist on performance over reality, and curate narratives at the expense of competence will witness erosion. The choice is active and urgent. This is not a prediction, but a call. America can choose to write its own autopsy now or postpone it until the quiet recognition forces the hand. The patient's heartbeat is faint but present. Monitoring, diagnosis, and intervention can restore vitality. The next 5 years will determine whether America becomes the example of managed transition or the cautionary tale of ignored whispers. History waits for no one. The autopsy is being prepared, and the vital signs are there for all who choose to see. America's strength, resilience, and superpower status will be defined by its capacity to observe, diagnose, and act, not by appearance, not by performance, but by the courage to confront reality and adapt before 2026 enforces the lesson.